Here is your story, 3,000 words, clean language, no headings, no titles. Mira did not ask for help. She never did. The pipe burst on a Wednesday night, which was already a bad night because Wednesday was the night she did the math. Every Wednesday, after the girls were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with a small notebook and a pen that was almost out of ink, and she wrote down the numbers. Rent. Food. The electricity bill that went up every winter. The shoes Fun needed because she had grown 2 sizes since spring and was walking on the sides of her feet now like a little ship listing in shallow water. The numbers never came out right. They came close sometimes. Close was not the same as right. She was sitting with the notebook when she heard the water. It started as a sound in the ceiling, a kind of groan, like the building was complaining about something, and then the groan became a hiss and the hiss became a trickle and the trickle became a steady stream that came through the light fixture above the kitchen table and landed directly on the notebook. Mira sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up the notebook, moved it to the counter, put a pot under the drip, and went to knock on the building manager's door. The building manager did not answer. The building manager was a man named Gerald who answered his door with the same energy he brought to everything, which was none. She slid a note under his door. She went back to her apartment. She put a second pot beside the first pot and went to bed. She did not sleep very well. In the morning, the ceiling was worse. There was now a stain spreading across it like a slow brown flour, and the drip had become 2 drips, and Fun stood in the kitchen doorway looking at the pots with great scientific interest. Are we collecting rain? Fun asked. Yes, Mira said. Go get dressed. Fun was 7 years old and accepted most of life's oddities without much trouble. Lyra, who was 4, came out of the bedroom behind her sister, looked at the pots, looked at the ceiling, looked at her mother, and went back into the bedroom to get her stuffed rabbit. She carried the rabbit everywhere when she was uncertain about the world. She was uncertain about the world most of the time. The knock came that afternoon. Mira opened the door expecting Gerald. Instead she found the man from the apartment upstairs, the one she had seen twice in the hallway, both times carrying rolls of paper under his arm, both times nodding at her in a way that was polite without being friendly, which she had respected. He was holding a mop. He also had a bucket. He looked like he had practiced what he was going to say and then forgotten it at the last second. I'm Kale, he said. I live upstairs. The pipe, it's from my unit. Gerald told me it's my responsibility, apparently, which I don't think is actually true, but I didn't argue with him, so. He held up the mop. I thought I could at least help with the hallway. Mira looked at the mop. She looked at him. He had brown eyes and a small scar on his chin and the expression of a man who had already decided he was going to be told no and was prepared to accept that. The hallway, she said. Yes. Not my apartment. No, I didn't want to assume. She considered him for a moment. Then she opened the door a little wider and stepped aside. The kitchen is worse than the hallway, she said. He mopped. She watched him while she made dinner, keeping one eye on the stove and one eye on this stranger moving carefully around her kitchen, moving the pots aside to mop under them and then putting them back exactly where they had been. Fun came in and watched him too, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. What's your name? Fun asked. Kale. That's a short name. Yes, he agreed. My name is Fun. It's also short. My full name is Funera, but nobody says that. She watched him mop for another moment. Do you want to stay for dinner? Fun, Mira said. We have enough soup, Fun said, which was not entirely true but was close enough to be polite. Kale looked at Mira. Mira looked at the stove. There's enough soup, she said, because what else do you say? He ate the soup at the corner of the table, in the chair that was furthest from everything, like a man who was very aware of the space he was taking up. Fun told him about her school, her teacher whose name was Mr. Okafor and who had a very loud laugh, and the lizard she wanted but her mother had said absolutely not. Kale listened to all of this with genuine attention, which Fun noticed immediately, because children always notice when an adult is actually listening. Lyra did not come out of the bedroom at all. After dinner he washed his bowl, said thank you, and left. The hallway smelled like wet wood. The ceiling still dripped. Mira sat with the notebook again and looked at the numbers and thought about something other than the numbers for the first time in a long time. She did not examine that thought too closely. She had a system. He came back the next day to check on the ceiling, which Gerald had still not fixed. He brought a flashlight and looked at the light fixture with the focused expression of someone who had no idea what they were looking at but was taking it very seriously. Fun told him the history of every ceiling stain in the apartment, some of which she had invented. He listened to all of them. Lyra watched from behind the couch. She had positioned herself so that only her eyes and the top of her rabbit were visible. Cale noticed her on his way out but did not say anything to her directly. He said goodbye to Fun, said goodnight to Mira, and left. But when Mira turned around, she found Lyra standing in the middle of the living room, no longer behind the couch. It was a small thing. She filed it away and said nothing. The ceiling got fixed on Friday, not by Gerald, but by a man Gerald sent, who arrived, looked at it, made a sound, and fixed it in 40 minutes. The pipe above Cale's apartment was replaced. The dripping stopped. The brown flour on the ceiling dried and stayed there as a reminder, which was the kind of thing old buildings did. There was no longer a reason for him to knock on her door. He knocked anyway, a week later, to ask if she had any sugar. This was transparently an excuse and they both knew it, and she gave him the sugar and he thanked her, and 2 days after that he knocked again with a container of soup. I made too much, he said, which was an excuse of the same quality, and she took the soup and fed it to the girls for lunch and said nothing about the excuse because she did not have the energy to say something and also, quietly, did not want to. Fun adopted him with the swift confidence of a child who has decided. She reported on him to Mira the way she reported on everything important in her life, thoroughly and without invitation. He was a cartographer's assistant. That meant he made maps. He had traveled to 4 countries to make maps. He drank his tea without sugar. He was very good at drawing clouds, which Fun considered a vital skill. I like him, Fun announced one evening. I know, Mira said. Do you like him? I don't know him very well. Fun considered this. You know him well enough for soup, she said, and went back to her drawing. Mira stood at the sink for a moment looking out the window at the street below. The city moved along without caring about her, which was fine. The city had always moved that way. She was used to it. The evening it changed was a Sunday in November. The girls had gone to bed early because Lyra had a cold and Fun had decided that if Lyra was sleeping then she would sleep too, in a show of sisterly solidarity that Mira found both touching and suspicious. The apartment was quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. Cale had come over at 6 with a card game he thought Fun might like. When he found out the girls were already down, he offered to leave. She told him to sit down. She made tea. They sat at the kitchen table and he told her about a map he was working on, a coastal region where 3 rivers met, and she told him about the factory, about the particular rhythm of work that is so constant it becomes something close to silence in the mind. They talked the way people talk when they are not trying to impress each other anymore. The tea got cold. He was in the middle of saying something, she couldn't remember afterward exactly what, something about the river map, about the way water moves on paper, and she noticed that he was looking at her in a way that was different from how he usually looked at her, and she felt it before she could name it, and the system she had built and maintained and repaired for 4 years told her to stop it here. So she stopped it. She put her hand flat on the table between them. Not on his hand. Between them. She said it the way she said every hard thing, plainly, without softness to disguise it and without hardness to defend it. I have 2 children, she said. You don't have to stay. The kitchen was very quiet. He looked at her hand on the table. Then he looked at her face. She held very steady under that look. She had learned to hold steady. She had gotten very good at it. I know, he said. She waited for the rest of the sentence. There was no rest of the sentence. He picked up his tea. It was cold. He drank it anyway. She watched him drink it and could not read his face and did not know what that meant. She was used to being able to read most things. And then the bedroom door opened, and Lyra came out in her socks with the owls on them, her rabbit tucked under her arm, her cold stuffed nose making her look like she had strong opinions about being awake. She walked to the couch, climbed up beside Cale, and settled into the space next to him with the absolute lack of drama of a person who has been sitting next to someone her whole life. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. He shifted just slightly to give her more room, and his arm went out to the side instinctively, and Lyra leaned into the warmth of his side and closed her eyes. Mira sat at the kitchen table and looked at her cold tea. She had handed him a door. He had sat down. She didn't know what to do with that. She decided to let herself not know for a while, which was the bravest thing she had done in a long time. It was not dramatic after that. Real things are rarely dramatic. They are usually just quiet and present and there. He was there on Tuesday nights, which became a habit that no one declared and no one questioned. He was there when the electricity went out in January and they sat in the kitchen with 3 candles and Fun told ghost stories that were more funny than frightening. He was there when Lyra had her first nightmare and woke up screaming and Mira got there first, as she always did, but Cale appeared in the hallway behind her without being asked, standing just far enough away to be useful if needed and not in the way if not. He learned that Mira took her coffee without anything in it, dark and plain like a small act of stubbornness. He learned that she laughed at things she found genuinely funny and did not laugh at things she did not, which seemed obvious but was actually rare. He learned that she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with the specific weight of doing everything yourself for years and years with no one to hand any part of it to. He did not try to take the weight. He understood, somehow, that she had carried it long enough that it had become part of her posture, and pulling it away suddenly would do more damage than good. Instead he stood beside it. He held parts of the door when her hands were full. He sat at the corner of the table when the math in the notebook went wrong and did not say anything helpful or unhelpful, just sat there with his tea while she worked through it. Fun asked him to teach her to draw clouds, and he did. She was very good at it. Lyra stopped hiding behind the couch completely somewhere around February. Mira noticed the exact day but said nothing about it, the way you don't say anything about a bruise that has finally finished healing because saying it out loud might remind the bruise of what it was. She asked him once, on a night in March when the city outside was loud with rain and the apartment felt very small and very warm, why he had stayed. He thought about it for a while. He was not the kind of man who answered things before he'd thought about them, which he had come to appreciate. I wasn't ready to leave, he said. That's not the same as a reason to stay. No, he agreed. But it was honest. She looked at him. He looked back. The rain hit the window. Lyra was asleep in the bedroom, her rabbit on the pillow beside her. Fun was asleep with a library book open on her chest, which Mira would close gently in another hour. The apartment smelled like cardamom and wet coats and the particular warmth of a place that has been lived in long enough to have its own smell. Honest is fine, she said. For now. He nodded. He turned back to the map on his lap, a sketch of a coastline with a harbor she didn't know, his pen moving in small careful lines. She picked up her own notebook, the one with the numbers, and opened it. But she didn't write anything. She sat for a moment in the quiet of the apartment and the rain and the warm, and she thought, nobody left. It landed the way true things land, not like a wave, not like a revelation, but like a stone settling to the bottom of still water. Simple. Small. Heavier than it looked. Nobody left. She had given him the door and he had sat down and now it was March and he was sitting here in her apartment drawing a harbor with careful hands and her children were asleep in the next room and nobody had left. She opened the notebook. She wrote the numbers. They did not come out right. They came close. She put the pen down and looked at them for a moment, and for the first time in 4 years, close felt like enough. She would do the rest of the math another night. On a Sunday in April, Fun asked the question Mira had been waiting for. She asked it the way she asked every question, directly, without any sense that it might be complicated, looking up from the cloud she was drawing on a piece of paper already covered in clouds. Is Cale going to be our dad? The apartment went very quiet. Cale was sitting across from her. His pen had stopped. Mira was at the stove with her back to both of them. She turned around. Cale was looking at her. Not asking anything. Not pushing. Just looking, the way he looked at maps when he wanted to understand the shape of something. I don't know yet, Mira said. It was the most honest thing she had said to her daughter in 4 years. Maybe longer. Fun looked at her mother. She looked at Cale. She made the face she made when she was calculating something, her small brow pulled together, one tooth biting her lower lip. Okay, she said, and went back to her cloud. Kale looked at Mira. Mira looked at Kale. Something passed between them that had no word for it, or had too many words for it, or was simply the kind of thing that does not need words because it has already made itself at home in the room. She turned back to the stove. The cloudfin drew that morning was the best one she had ever done. She showed it to Kale first, then her mother, then Lyra, who looked at it seriously and then said, "Bird." "It's a cloud, Lyra." Lyra looked at it again. "Nice cloud," she said, and handed it back. Fun pinned it to the wall beside the window, in the space between two other drawings, in the space that had been empty for a while and now, quietly, was not.